you're all doing extremely well this Tuesday, March the 3rd. This year's going ridiculously fast. This month again will fly by. I remember February time, absolute blur, and it's going very, 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 very quickly. So I hope you're all doing extremely well this Tuesday. Look, this is the best community on this platform. We might be small, but we are mighty. We are pushing 40k now, which is absolutely ridiculous. That's a big, obviously, thank you to everybody involved. The first thing to say is this: look, get into the chat. Be respectful to the community. Be respectful to me. Be respectful to yourselves. Otherwise, the ban hammer comes out. Look, we don't always have to agree on certain things. I think it's good when we don't agree, because I think it encourages debate. And look, you know, we're not always going to agree. So get in with your comments. Also, I'm not a dictator of this chat. I do read out your comments, and if I do come back on a comment, it's not because I'm trying to disrespect the comments. Sometimes people do disrespect me, and I will come back on it. But it really does depend on what the comment is. So look, I'd love to know how we are doing today in the chat. So let me know what is going on. So look, tomorrow Dino is in the house. Legend Dino. Look, Dino, we are nearly pushing 40k. Dino, 40k subs, which is ridiculous, and obviously it's all thanks to you guys. When we get to 40k, I will be giving some stuff away. Again, with every 10k subs, I do give things away. Look, I don't take it for granted. 40k subs is ridiculous. We are nearly there, and let's see what we can do, Dino. But look, you know, if and when we get there, look, this is a big, as I say, a big win for this community. Henderson, mate, I love it. It's great to finally be here. I love it, mate. It's that as a catchphrase. I think that is amazing. So look, today we're going to go through the Newcastle game, as I think we always do. The only one I missed was a Crystal Palace one, just because I wasn't great. So I think, look, we're going to go through it. We'll go through it, and then look, whether I like this or not, we've got to talk about the reports that are coming out today. There are reports. Anderson reports. Look, you know, as much as I'm not the biggest fan of doing things for clicks. Look, I've put it on there. I've not put the Anderson on the thumbnail. But look, I think it's worth a discussion. Obviously, we went through the financials last night. Forza Atalanta, cheers from Italy. Lion says, Christian, absolute legend. Fergus says, we have been very lucky in games. How do you think our luck will last? And I think that's a great question. You know, I think that's a great place to start. Now, look, I always get accused of being a negative Nelly at times, and look, it is something that I take no pleasure in it. You know, one thing I will say, in my view, is that this season is a ridiculously competitive season. I think that this is a not a vintage year, and I think that any team is capable of beating anybody else. You know, if you look at Newcastle's last home game, I think they lost 3-2. So I think Fergus, what depends today is this is going to be our toughest test under Carrick has gone. I don't disagree with you. I think Newcastle are going to be up for the game. I think this game will suit us. The reason why I think that is because I think Newcastle are going to push up high. I think they are going to push up high. Now, where my concern is, and look, we will go through the game. We will go through how Newcastle play. I think this is going to be end to end. I think there are going to be goals galore. I really do. You know, the worry of mine every single games are those fullbacks. Luke Shaw, I mean, I don't know if he's going to play a part. I'm more comfortable with Mazraoui there. Diallo for me is a concern. So I think one of the things we are going to have to be concerned about are those backs. Newcastle aren't just going to sit there rock 'em sock 'em football incoming. They are. I know we will go through the team. And look, getting your opinions of how you think that we'll do, and then I'll give you my opinion as I always do, and then we'll talk about the score. So Newcastle, look, let's talk about how they play. They are high intensity. Look, I think one of the things that they've suffered from this season, I think injuries. I also think that playing in European competition hasn't helped them. I don't think they've got a big enough squad. I don't think they've got a deep enough squad to do both. So I think European football this year, other than an Arsenal, a City, because they're capable, they sort of know. For instance, if we score first, Newcastle will crumble. If they score first, we have it tough at home. It is going to be a very, very, very tough game. Now we're away, aren't we? We are away. I will just check that. I'm sure that we are away. Here we are away. So Newcastle, look, that crowd is going to play a massive, massive part. And folks, where I do agree with you on this, my friend, is that Newcastle so Josh says hello Josh. If Newcastle score first, then look, Newcastle don't play a low block. So I think even if Newcastle score first, I think that we can still come back into the game. My worry for this game is not necessarily the front three or four. My concern is the midfield. Casemiro hasn't been great the last couple of games. I don't think Casemiro has been good at all. Kobe Mainoo, for me, look, Kobe Mainoo, I think he's still trying to figure out what he is. I don't think he's been good enough the last couple of games. You know, I just think that this game is going to be a very, very, very open game. So look, how do they play? Newcastle, as we know, high intensity. They are structured but fluid in a 4-3-3, a 4-1-4-1. Bruno G, Tonali really concern me. That positioning really, really concerns me. Now, as you guys have said, we're going to see Carrick, what he can do. I don't necessarily think how Carrick is going to set up in this match is going to necessarily be good. Look, I am happily if Carrick corrects me. I think Carrick's tactical nous in this team is very, very limited. I think he's going to play a version of counter-attack. I think that's all this team can do. Whether or not Carrick, the difficulty for me right now is I don't know whether Carrick tactically has to play this way because of the players that he's got, or whether or not this is Carrick tactical nous, whether this is his style of play. And Linetal, you are correct. Newcastle are going to be up for this game. Look, Newcastle historically are pretty decent in the fixture. Dino, my worry is I think Newcastle are going to start fast. I think that the midfield, I think you're right. This game is going to be won and lost in that midfield. So look, they are high intensity. They will press. The one thing that they've got that we lack is a structure. They are rotationally extremely well. They build up, so they move from left to right. They are a very, very good high pressing team that are really, really well drilled. Henderson says if they play start fast, they might play into our hands. Now that is the caveat. That is the caveat to this. I think this is going to be very, very similar to the Man City and an Arsenal game, because I think they're very, very open. They're very, very expansive. And is this going to be a good counter-attack game? Now, I think Henderson has got a point. I think this could play into our hands, but we have to start fast. We've got to. Fergie says the trouble with counter-attack means we have to invite them on, and can our backs handle it? And this is my concern. This is my concern. Can Casemiro provide the cover, and can the backs provide that support? Also, just supply that defensive cover whilst trying to go forward as well. And I think Fergus, I think that is one of the primary concerns. Now look, Newcastle, they like to build up in a 4-3-3. Hence says we're so fluid on the break these days. Yes, we are, and this is probably where I think the game will go for me. Is going to be, I think, defensive midfield for Newcastle against our fluid attack. And I think that Newcastle's strike force, and again, touch wood, Walter Marder hasn't been great. Wizard, let's be fair, hasn't been great. So I think, other than the wingers, if you look at Gordon is a very, very dangerous player. Harvey Barnes as well. Nikarutsu is in the chat. Afternoon, JB. Nikarutsu is a legend. So look, they play with a back four. They play with a number 6, and they play with 2 number 8. And I think that is going to be quite key. I think Newcastle are going to that midfield. I think that midfield battle is going to dictate. Now, I think that Newcastle will have a lot of possession. I don't necessarily think that they've got the outlet. I think that we will press high and we will look to counter, and I think that we can get them on that break, but we're going to have to get a handle on that midfield. Dino says, attack, I think we can hurt them, but equally the attack could embarrass our defence. I think it's going to be a fascinating game. I think, for me, this is going to be one of the ticks. If Carrick can go into this game and win it, that for me is going to be a big tick, because this is going to be this ground, this game is going to be a very, very noisy, very, very noisy ground, as we know. Can Carrick come up with a way? Because if Luke Shaw is out, Diallo, what happens if we're getting overrun? Is Carrick going to be able to tweak this? So I think, for me, this will be a big tick. If Carrick can come through this game and win, for me, that is going to be a big tick. Do I want to give Carrick the job now? No, but there are certain markers, certain games for me where I think Carrick is going to be able to kind of, start to earn his stripes and start to make a case for himself. So Newcastle, look, they're pretty much midfield sound. We need to win the 50-50s in the midfield. And Ferguson, this is where I think that we fell. I don't think we're going to win the midfield battle. And that the two concerns of mine are the midfield battle, and are going to be Gordon, and is it Barnes that plays, or Alanga or Barnes who play on that side. This game will show our midfield isn't strong enough, and I do agree. Scott is in the house, and I will get on to the Amad stuff as well. It was an Instagram or a Snapchat post, and we will go through that as well. I don't think Amad is going to leave. Amad, look, if we keep Amad and we add to the squad, the depth up front will be absolutely crazy. So look, Newcastle fullbacks, I think at times they will form a back three. They are stable in possession. They've got good angles to beat the press. Now, one of the worrying things for me are they are well drilled. They're very, very stable in possession, and that stability comes from the midfield. They do look to angle those passes, and they look to get the runners in behind. All season we have struggled. We've struggled with the wing backs. We've struggled with the left back, the right back. And my concern is those angled balls into those wingers. Now, I don't think Newcastle have got anything up front that we need to be scared of. And I do think Harry Maguire can play a decent part in this game as well. Scott says Amad is one to keep. Fuck Bruno off, instead play Amad as the 10. That problem is we can't string two passes in the midfield until we're playing it back and not forward. Amad wants to leave. Is he turning into Rashford, thinking he's bigger than the club? And look, I will get into that. I will be fair. I don't think necessarily that he wants to leave. It's just an Instagram post. I think that's a very, very interesting post. I think Carrick needs to change the midfield or make a new. And look, I agree with you. I agree with you. That midfield, we cannot have the pivot in there. I think Carrick, yeah. Look, I do agree with you. I think Bruno is going to have to do some defensive work. Bruno, for me, look, people say that Bruno is a number 10, right? That is his position, right? In this squad, Bruno is not a 10. Bruno is a free role player. Sometimes he's a 10, sometimes he's an 8. Bruno Fernandez has to do defensive work. I think Bruno Fernandez in this game has to sacrifice going forward, and I think he has to play in a midfield 3. I think for us to get hold of the midfield, I think Bruno Fernandez has to get involved in that 3. If not Bruno Fernandez, one of the number 10s, he's going to have to come back. Now, Cunha could be the guy. It could be that Boomer and Cunha take it in turns to form a midfield 3. But the problem then with that is that we sacrifice a forward player. So I think that Bruno Fernandez needs to come back, because I don't think a midfield of Casemiro, Kobe Mainoo is not defensive enough. So I think Bruno Fernandez or somebody is going to have to drop back. Midfield wise, again, as we've spoken about, they're very, very good. They're very, very good in that transitions. Tonali is ridiculous. Nigerian races, Amad Babai, scorers for African, says Dicky. Amad is young, he wants more games and more money, and there are teams out there that will do that. Shesko on the bench, Team England. Look, I think will he play Shesko? Will he play a Shesko? That is the question. I think Shesko is perfect in this game. I do. I think Shesko is perfect. I think we need to win the first balls, second balls. And look, when you got somebody who's 6'4", who can jump high, I think Shesko needs to play, because I think one of the things that we can do to counter their press is to get the ball forward, is to get the ball over the top, and Shesko can win those balls. Shesko is very, very good at winning that ball. So I think Shesko should play. I think we need that height in there to win the first ball, or certainly win the second ball. Shesko will be able to be. Shesko could even come deep. That sounds wrong. Shesko can come back, and then Bruno can run off. Cunha can run off. You can have the runners in behind. So I think I think Shesko is perfect. Lee says Casemiro and Kobe's even in poor form. Casemiro and Kobe's even in poor form are fire. Carrick is crushing it simply on playing the boys where they best play. And look, Lee, I think that's an interesting opinion. I don't think Casemiro and Kobe are on fire. I don't think they are. The last two games, I disagree, mate. I think Casemiro and Kobe in the last two games have been dire. I think Carrick tactically is limited. I think what Carrick, well, I do agree with you, Lee, is I think it's a very underrated skill to get players up for playing games. Now, what impressed me about the Crystal Palace game in the second half was the ability for these players to get themselves up. Now, look, Carrick himself, look, and look, these aren't my words. These are the Carrick words. Carrick's words were, go back and look at it. Carrick said he didn't have anything to do with the second half. He said the reason why they played well was because the players decided amongst themselves that they were going to change. And that is the concerning thing for me, Lee. You know, look, people are going to have their opinions on these players. My opinion at the moment is that is this the Ollie effect? I'm not comparing the two. I don't think it's two. The situation for me is very, very Ollie-esque. Ollie played the plays in their positions. Look, I'm not necessarily going to go into it now. I do have my opinions. People are not going to agree with me. People will not agree with me on the Amorim side. But it depends on these players, Lee. In my view, it doesn't matter what Carrick tells these players. It's whether or not these players, in my view, are up for playing this game. Can these players get themselves up to play this game? And these players will dictate what happens. Carrick's tactics will not dictate what happens in this game. How these players feel will dictate. But I do agree with you. Carrick has done something simple. He's put these players in positions in their natural positions. Whether or not I agree with that, I don't agree overall that this squad is good enough to mount a title charge, to get to mount a Champions League charge. Where I do agree with you, and look, I'm not disrespecting the opinion. Where I do agree with you, I think Carrick is taking it back, simplified, and I think we are counter-attack player FC. Go old school, a 4-4-2 at the wings and cross into the box. Shesko is a lot faster. Shesko is ridiculously fast. Dicky, mate, you're gone, mate. You're gone, Dicky. I think Carrick changed the defence. I think Carrick needs to change the defence and the midfield. And the red card, that was a help as well. So who is managing the team? Look, Fergus, Carrick is the interim coach. I think, look, these players dictate. These players look, a manager can only tell you the tactics. The manager can only tell you what to do, right? It is the players that have to go out on that pitch to perform. If you listen to how Carrick speaks, he talks about the boys. He talks about, the lads, the guys, He never mentions tactics. He never mentions structure. He never mentions performance-based, the metrics on performance. He just doesn't. He keeps talking about heart. He keeps talking about, the way the players feel, the boys. That is what we are right now. And look, if it works, it works. I am not opposed. I am not opposed right now it seems to work. But let's not pretend that the last 3 or 4 games are a tactical masterclass, because they're not. Herbie is in now. Hi, Jibby. I hope all is well with you. Lee says he's a manager when you have that. The quality is not about the tactic. It's about making the players believe he's doing that 100%. Now, look, Lee, I think that's an interesting comment. Where I'm going to disagree, and look, I'm not disrespecting the comment, mate. I think that's a very, very legitimate thing to say. Where I disagree with that comment, Lee, is even if from an emotional standpoint, if you have a team that know their jobs, if you have a team that have a structure and it becomes second nature to a player. Look, for example, if you got Cunha and you said to him, look, this is your position, keep on running in those positions, whether or not they're having a bad day, a bad game, emotionally they're not happy, they're still going to be able to perform their job. It's like when you go in to work and you know what job you've got to do, whether you've had a bad night's sleep, whether you're pissed off at work, whatever it is, you know your job that you need to do. Lee, it has to be about the tactics. You can't just have a team running on emotion. It doesn't work long term. You know, what happens if these players have an argument? What happens if somebody pisses somebody off? The team capitulates because there is no structure within the team. If you look at the treble winning team, right, there were players in that team that hated each other. Andy Cole and Teddy, they hated each other. They couldn't stand each other. But both players knew their positions. Both players knew how to play. My worry with this team, Lee, and look, I understand exactly your point. My problem with this team is that, is there enough structure in this team that when things go wrong emotionally and these players are not happy, are they still going to be able to perform those roles because the structure isn't there? So look, I think, Lee, I think you need both. I think the valid point here is that the management side has to be that 100%. These players have to believe in what it is that you're trying to do. But at the same time, if you don't have a structure, if you don't have a way to play, you are setting yourself up at times to fail. Mullamin says, hi, hello. Scott says, we're getting World War III before Arsenal win the league again. Herbie is in the house, up for the game. Imagine you're going to work and you do nothing, get 300k a week, you get sacked. And Fergus, mate, that is exactly the point that I'm trying to make here, is that whether I like it or not, these players are getting paid 300k, 200k a week, right? And of course, they're going to be not happy with something. We know what these players are, right? We know that. I think because of the wins, I think people have forgotten about what these players are, right? These players shouldn't need to get up for the game, and even if they did, if you look at a Pep team, right? Pep drills these players in the way he wants them to play. Look, they've been inconsistent, but these players know their roles. I don't think these players do. These players are playing on emotion. These players are playing. And Carrick has said this himself. Carrick is letting these players express themselves. I think you need to express. Carrick needs to let these players express themselves, but in a structured way. You can still play with expansive freedom. You can still, Bruno Fernandez can still be the maverick. I think Bruno Fernandez would play better if he had a defined role in this team. Bruno Fernandez doesn't have a defined role. Bruno Fernandez's role in this team is a free role. And I think the problem with that, and the reason why I mention him, is because the team is built around him. He is the most important player in this team as far as the team structure goes. So I think if we had a little bit more structure in this team, look, you can have the man management. You can tickle their tummies. My worry is what happens when you have another Palace in the first half, but you're not playing a Crystal Palace. So, look, I don't disagree with you. I think that is an important part as well. Henderson says the modern football team, with some exceptions, has decentralised the management. Hence, Amrin was the head coach. Newcastle game will be a good test for both Carrick and the players' mentality for the players against the side that ain't afraid to go toe to toe. See Fergie for the details. You ran 4-4-4-4-2. Yeah, but Lee, Fergie didn't. Yeah, but Fergie didn't just let his players play. There was a structure in this team. Lee, look, I watched this side. I've watched this club since 1987. There were coaches behind the scenes. There were coaches. Look, he played a 4-4-2, but actually towards the end, Fergie adapted his teams. Fergie played a 4-3-3 at some points, but there was coaching behind the scenes. Fergie didn't just let these players play how they liked. There was coaching, there was structure. The reason why towards the treble, you can argue that Fergie from a tactical perspective maybe let these players, have the freedom to choose, but these players knew their roles. These players had played together for 7-8 years. Giggsy knew his role. Beckham did. Keane, Scholesy. When you've got those players who have gelled together, who know their positions, it's second nature. They knew where they were. They had confidence in this team. The left back, the right back. People forget. Evra was terrible. Vidic was terrible. They weren't just allowed to become good. The reason why they became good was because tactically they had to learn the game. Tactically they had to fit into the system. So Lee, I disagree with that, mate. These players weren't allowed just go and play their game. There was tactical structure in place, and then they were allowed to play their game. But look, these players are by no comparison to any of our best teams. I think Carrick just make the new tactic to win or see the trouble in the midfield. Pep doesn't get the team, inherited the team, just added to them. Imagine being proud of not doing your job to the best of your abilities. I am a landscaper. I'm never happy when it rains, but that doesn't mean I do a bad job. Exactly. Everywhere you went, there's never a shortage of talent. Exactly. We're missing fullbacks. Diallo is poor, sure, isn't it? We need to replace Casemiro. Just love the way we're playing. We got to replace the right players and not the manager. And look, Lee, mate, I think you're making some good points. I'd argue, Lee, my argument to that then would be why was an Amarin sacked? Look, I'm just using what you're saying there, Lee. Why was an Amarin sacked? If Amarin had his fullbacks, if Amarin had a decent defensive midfield player, and Amarin got his own players in, why did we need to change the manager? And look, people are going to have and say, look, the players weren't playing in their positions. The style of play wasn't great. The last couple of games, look, do I like the way that we're playing? No, I don't. I like how the forward players are playing. I don't like how we're playing. I think we're basically half of a team. I don't like how we're playing. I don't. I like how the front four are playing. I like the transition. I like the counter. I like Cunha. I like Bruno Fernandez when he's actually in the game. In Bumo, Ashesco, I like that aspect of our game, but I don't like the midfield. I don't like the back four. Larmins, I do like. Look, Lee, mate, and you're going to have your opinion. Look, let's not pretend here that we're playing well. I don't like how we're playing. I don't. I like certain parts. I like, as I've just said, I like the transitional phase. I like the forward players, but that pivot isn't great. The back four isn't great. So I agree with you in some. Look, I agree with you about the fullbacks. I don't like how we play. And look, I get many match going fans on here, Lee. And I mean, I don't know if you're a match going fan. One of the consistent consensus is that we don't play well. What we do is we are moments. We are moments FC. That is what we are. I believe having an inexperienced aging midfielder is part of having no structure. We need two midfielders who can take control of the game. Amrin was sacked because he was sacked. Carrick deserves a job, and it's obvious. I disagree with you. I disagree, Traveller. I respect the opinion. I fully understand why people want Carrick in charge. I get it. It's too early. It's far too early. Now, all I'm going to say here is this. I fully appreciate that if Carrick gets this team into top 3, 4, 5, and if it's a choice of a Glasner, look, outside of an Enrique, a Tuchel, a Nagelsmann, is there anybody else over a Carrick that I would want in terms of a De Zerbi? No. A Glasner? No. Arola? No. Really, the only coaches that I would take over him right now who are not available, but I would take an Emery over him. I would take a Nagelsmann. I would take a Tuchel. I would take an Enrique. Carrick is going to get the job. I think that it is quite clear. But when you say Carrick deserves the job, I think it's too early. I think where I'm at is I think Carrick is playing himself into the job. I think Carrick he's passing tests. He's passing tests. For me, it's almost like Carrick is sitting an exam, right? He's being asked questions after questions. And if he comes through the game tonight and wins again tonight, that is a massive big tick. But I don't see this obsession with giving him the job now. What's he going to do? Is he going to leave? No. So I would rather wait until the end of the season And if Carrick finishes third, then give him the job. I just don't see right now. I don't want to walk into this Ollie trap, because if you give him a contract now and it capitulates, and we absolutely just capitulate, then what happens then? I think from a logical perspective, I'm not saying don't give him the job. I wouldn't right now. I'm saying this wait until the end of the season. Look, from a logical perspective, Carrick is not going to go anywhere. The players are playing well. Why rock the boat? I think let's get through to the end of the season, and then look, if we finish third, Fergie says, I remember Fergie saying, what the point if you're 1-0 down, playing a system, but everyone in the box and see what happens at the end of the game. Opinion are like, also every one of us has one. I mean, and exactly, look, and that is exactly the point. I don't think my opinion is any better than yours. I think everybody has an opinion, and this is why I read out your chats, is because I think it's important. If I comment on it, doesn't mean I think I'm right. It's just something that I sort of always do. But you're right. Everybody has an opinion. There are some opinions that are probably right in terms of, like best players potentially. But I agree with you. Abdullah says we need a new number 3, 7, 6, 11 next season before our problems get solved. Lee says, being a United fan since 1990, this is the best footy we've played post Fergie. Maguire is on fire, solid keeper. Do I think this is the best football we've played? I don't look, Lee. I disagree with you. I think it's the best football we've played in the last 4 years. I disagree with you. I do, mate. I do. I think this is some of the. I think this is probably the best football we've played since an Ollie. I do. I think Moyes' ball was awful. Van Gaal was awful. I think this is probably the best that we've played since Ollie. I think Ollie's style of play was better because I think it was consistent. I think this is probably the best period that we've had, I would agree, in the last 4 years. I don't agree right now it is the best football we've played. But look, let's see. There is a top 5 or so players that should not be playing for United. Victor says, hi. John McQueen says, losing this one 100%. Carrick isn't the man for the job. We play in the moments we just watch the games, and you see I'm right. And look, John, mate, I've tried to be very, very level-headed, John. And what's going to happen if we lose this game? If we lose this game and Bruno Fernandez doesn't play well, Carrick doesn't play particularly well, he manages particularly well, the Bruno Fernandez world class will be quiet again. I want those people who think Bruno Fernandez, and the reason why I mention him is because it is the Bruno Fernandez show. If Bruno Fernandez plays shit, I still want those people to come on here and still say that Bruno Fernandez is world class. I think if you've got an opinion, this is why right now I keep my opinion as balanced as I can. Look, this is what I mean, John, and I am, it is that we need to take this every single game. If we don't take this every single game, we've got 10 games left. What happens if Carrick draws the next 5? What happens if he loses games? I'm not saying that he will, and I hope this isn't the case. I originally said at the start of the season, I think we finished between 4th between 8th and 10th. I don't think that we will, but we've got to just take it every single game. I've been saying this that this is a cup final every single game, and in 99 for the first half of the season, we're shit. Look, Lee, mate, let's not pretend, mate, Lee. Let's not pretend that this squad is like the 99 squad, mate, because it's not. I just want people to accept the reality we're in and not where we previous were about what isn't. I just want people to accept where we're in and not where we were. The problem with me for that is this is the same season. I am enjoying the moment, but you can't forget the rest of the season, because in games, the problem for me is that people are in this realm where apparently we're playing this amazing world-class football. We're not. We are getting through games. I think we're going through a fantastic spell, and I don't care if we stumble through games as long as we win. But let's not pretend that some of this football that we've been playing in the last 3 games is not the same as we've played all season. So, I in some respects I agree with you. I'm trying not to look back, but it's very, very difficult when I don't agree and I'm trying to justify my opinion on the basis that when I'm being told that this is we're playing some amazing stuff, we are, but there are moments in these games where I don't think that we're particularly good. And we were sacked because he didn't have control, didn't accept the input of the board, and then had a public board couldn't take the honest opinion of Aaron, and they gave him the slip. That's news months past us now. I already know what will happen. He'll get the job. The team will down tools, and he'll be sacked in 12 months. Scott, the moment Carrick is the boss of these players, that is when you see these players drop. Carrick is the only coach to take United to the next level now because of all the players are showing us that. Lee says he's United to his bones and he bleeds red. Look, Lee, I don't understand what that's got to do with it. Like, I don't understand what that's got to do with him being a coach. Ferguson's blood wasn't red, and he was one of the best coaches we've ever seen. Pep's blood wasn't blue, and look at him. Klopp's blood wasn't red. Look at him. So, look, Lee, whilst I understand the point, I don't think that has an impact at all. I don't want a coach who is this isn't about the best in class. And look, all I'm going to say is what happens if Carrick is the guy and he wins a title, then you guys are right. I just don't see how anybody can know just yet. I just don't see it, and this is why. Look, I try to keep a level-headed opinion on the basis that you can't know. People can't know. You can guess. We can guess. I can guess that the moment that Carrick gets the job, if he's got the same set of players, these players eventually will stop playing. I might be wrong. You guys could be right. I just think that we just need to. I think we need to take it game by game. Carrick's results happen to be championship form. Just saying, as Arsenal man, you guys are back to keep the manager. You are 3 out of nowhere, and you got your signings firing. I guarantee that if we bring in a permanent manager, if he fell, then he will be Carrick interim again. I don't insinuate anything with a comment, just a very likely scenario. James says Balde, Hakimi, Zaire, Emery, CM plus Camavinga, and too many will be a dream window, but that's the quality that we need to go for. And look, James, I don't disagree with those. It's just That's just never going to happen. Well, if the player running the show want to give him the job, he can face the United or has to do and say the boys played well, and if asked about the tactics and the boys, nothing to do with me. In reality, that's not going to happen. Of course not. Under the right management, he's a threat, not a bad suggestion. You guys are qualifying for the Champions League. Unless you pull out of a nice time, you're aggressive, you have shape, and scoring goals. Let me ask you a question. Who did you think to be the next coach, apart from Carrick, to take back to the glory days? The manager is going to have... What I'm going to say here is this. Carrick is not solely going to win us a title. It's impossible. You need the players. You need a combination. Carrick on his own is not going to get this team to winning a title. It's not going to happen. If I was going to form a title winning team, I would go and get an Enrique. I would go and get the best in class. When I say the best in class to me means somebody who's won a title, somebody who's been in the Champions League for quite some time, somebody who's used to managing the big players, and I would go and get the big players. We are not going to do that, and I think Carrick is the best place to manage these players. We're not going to go for best-in-class players. We're not going to replace these players with 5 or 6 players. We're probably going to get 3. And I think in that situation, Carrick is going to be the best guy for the job. But with this squad, we're not going to win a title. Hope next season will be better. I trust Carrick because he knows the club. That he deserves it. Lee says, not even close, but Carrick is doing a job. This entire chat has been shit. I've been about shit plays, yet we are averaging 2.9 points a game, playing the top 2 in these games. We battered City. Look. We did batter City. We struggled against Spurs until we got the red card. West Ham struggled. The Toffees, we struggled. It took a last-minute goal. Crystal Palace, the first half, we struggled. We are doing what we're supposed to do. Look, I am not saying that Carrick shouldn't get the job. These players are not it. And whether we're averaging 2.9 points a game, you guys want to win a title. You're not winning a title with this squad. And people can accept that or not. We're not. And that is my humble view. You said it yourself. The only other coach we had post Fergie bled red. Fergie and Busby. Fergie wasn't a red, and Busby was a Liverpool guy. So they then bled red, like once they managed the club. But when they came into the club, like Carrick has come into the club as a red, right? Ferguson didn't come into this club as a red, and Busby was a Liverpool guy. So Amad wants to leave. On a different note, Shesko Shun promise as a world-class player. Sorry, I'm late. No, that's fine. We've had more managers than Sher since Fergie. That is not United. Under Carrick, we are unbeatable. People don't understand how big thing this is, especially the last 3 or 4 years. We're not unbeatable. We're not unbeatable. We're not unbeatable. We're not. No money for any players listed. When do you find out if you are successful? Henson says, why does Carrick need to be worthy of the gig, or can he be worthy of the job? Look, there is no manager or coach that is worthy of this job. right? They've got to earn it. Whether it's a Carrick, whether it's a Enrique, whether it's an Emery, they have to earn it. Does it mean they're better than Carrick? On paper, they are. But if Carrick earns this, he's just as entitled to this job. Look, if Carrick keeps winning these games and Carrick gets to the end of this season, it is no fluke. So I think that Carrick. I don't think anybody is worthy of this job. I think they need to earn the job, and Carrick is earning the job. April 1st, double, triple. Look at that. Let's have a little look. Please update me about the players we want to sign next season. I'll get onto that. Also, what's your thoughts on Bruno G and Tonali rumours for the replacement of Casemiro? Tonali, I don't think we're in talks with him, and Bruno, I think he's too old. And when I say I think he's too old, I don't think that United, the structure that we've got, there's no players over 26. He's going to be very, very expensive. And Newcastle are trying to tie him down to a new contract. I don't think that we sign him. If we struggle against the underdogs, who do you think if you struggle against the likes of Liverpool? If we struggle against the underdogs, what do you think if we struggle against the likes of Liverpool, Villa, Chelsea, we get stuffed? Now, look, there are certain games, there are certain types of games that this club can. Look, these players are a counter team, but Liverpool. Let's not pretend that Liverpool, we were all over Liverpool. We played well, but we weren't all over Liverpool. Villa, we lost to Villa. The Chelsea game, we did well because they had a red card. This is where Carrick is going. These are the games where Carrick is going to show you what this team is about. If Carrick wins tonight, big tick. Liverpool, big tick. Villa, big tick. So this is what I want to take it every game. Delusional to think United are back. James, I agree. They are working on getting back to what we expected. It will just take time before the new year. United were a joke. Just stay humble. James, I couldn't have summed it up better. Lee says, I remember a famous Scot saying, you can't win the league with kids. Exactly. Tonali and Guimarães are not pushing Newcastle. That's a good point. So look, interesting points there. So look, before I go, look, let's talk about transfers and where roughly that we are at with this. So look, I don't like talking about transfers that everybody are talking about, but I think today I do have to go into this. So look, there are reports out there today from the Mirror, and I have to acknowledge this, that the Anderson reports won't go away. Now, there are reports in the industry that Anderson has already chosen to go to a City, but according to his agent, nothing has been decided yet. And I don't disagree with that. There are too many outlets, there are too many reports now, basically saying that Anderson hasn't decided where to go. And I don't disagree with that. Do I think that we will get him? Ultimately, I think it depends. Like, if United finish third, I think we are in that race. I think as of now, Anderson is a City all over him. The additional thing here is City will pay him what he wants. So look, are we in with a shout? If we finish third, yes, but this isn't a done deal. We are in talks. We are in talks, but I think there is a long way to go. I think there is a very, very, very long way to go before we can even think about this. I think if we get third, I think we are in that race. But as of now, I think City are the choice. Nmecha from Dortmund. Again, there are reports linking us to him. 25 years old, 26 in October. Again, I actually quite like the player. Attacking, he can play centre mid, attacking mid, defensive mid. 26 years old. Would Ineos look to do that deal? He would be a player coming up to his prime. I like the signing. Nmecha, for me, I like it. The only problem for me is the Bundesliga. Does it translate into the English league? And my problem with that is when you're 26 years old, and that's the same as Stiller for me. When you're buying a player of that age, you can't take a risk. Wirtz I thought was very, very expensive. He's only now starting to play well. He's a young guy. We can't take a chance on an older player and have him take a season to play. So Nmecha for me, I do like. Not Amad. The last thing I'll say on him is this. Look, Amad made a comment on Snapchat and basically said, what is meant to grow doesn't stay in the same place forever. Now, does that mean Amad is going to go? So he basically said, what is meant to grow doesn't stay in the same place forever. Now, look, you can take that. You can take that however you like. Amad, for me, I think he loves this club. I do. I said this at the start of the season. I can understand why Amad would leave. I also can understand why this club would sell him. And the reason why they would sell him is because of the amount of money that they make. Now, when we're thinking about player, Amad, for me, I wouldn't sell him. But one of the things we've got to consider is the summer. We went through the financials. Yesterday. You've got to take that into account. So I would say watch this space on Amad. I don't want him to go. I would love him, to be in and around that squad. I think Amad could be one of those players that may consider his future. And also, don't forget, Ineos need the money as well. So, look, Amad, for me, I don't want him to go. Do I think he could? I think this could be the rumblings. I don't think that he's going to make waves to move. I think he's a very, very respectful player. I think he's a fantastic player. Let's see on that. Is Manu getting a new contract? Yes, Manu will sign a new contract. Manu is going to sign a new contract. Bruno Fernandez as well. Look, Bruno Fernandez, the talks are... The funny thing is, I've heard this chatter. Bruno Fernandez is in talks. No shit. Bruno Fernandez, this isn't news. Bruno Fernandez in talks. This isn't news. Bruno Fernandez has to be in talks because his contract ends next season. The interesting thing for me, and I did a video on this, that Bruno Fernandez needs to fucking decide quick, because we can't go into the World Cup with Bruno Fernandez not signing a contract, because if Bruno Fernandez decides to leave in August, we are screwed. So look, the only thing I'm going to say on this, and the talk is that we're going to build a side around Bruno Fernandez. I think that would be a mistake. I don't want to build a team around him. I want to build a team, and if Bruno is part of that, fantastic. But look, there are talks, and this isn't new. This is regurgitated shit. Of course, Bruno Fernandez is in talks because his contract ends fucking next year. So this is not a new thing. Bruno Fernandez is in talks and has been in talks since fucking last season. So Bruno Fernandez is going to look to do the deal. They need to build quick. He's getting old. And Henderson, I wouldn't build a team around him. I think it's ludicrous. I wouldn't build a team around him. I think all the best teams in the world don't build teams around a single player anymore. So that is where we are. They need to build quick. They're getting old. He doesn't have to be quick. The ball's in his court. He can wait and then get a better deal for himself. If he stays, he gets a better contract, or he leaves again. Look, just for the laugh, this is where I disagree with you. This is where I disagree with you completely. The ball shouldn't be in his court. The ball shouldn't be in Fernandez's court. Bruno Fernandez, and look, people will disagree with me. I don't care who you are. Bruno Fernandez does not have the right to decide his contract. This club needs to be, and I agree with you, it is player power. Bruno Fernandez does not have the right to decide if he stays or goes, in terms of if he wants to stay and this club wants him to stay. Bruno Fernandez can't dictate. Bruno Fernandez should not dictate. He is a player. When he goes, fans will eventually forget about him. Bruno Fernandez is a player. He should not and not hold the club to ransom over a contract. Either accept the contract or fuck off. I just got no time for this Bruno Fernandez, world class. He should be able to decide his future to a degree, yes. But any football club who is forward thinking, Bruno Fernandez, if he doesn't decide to sign a contract and he leaves in August, we are screwed. If this club had balls, Bruno Fernandez would sign the deal before he goes to the World Cup. We cannot take a chance. Bruno Fernandez is a player. He should absolutely not be deciding what happens. This club should be leading the talks. And if Bruno Fernandez doesn't want to sign a contract, or he's going to hesitate a contract, piss off. As simple as that for me. Bruno, the Bosman, if your contract expired, the club still held the registration. Now that's a thing of the past. Players have the power. Yeah, true. That's true. They again, once your deal's expired, so does the registration as well. So look, it's going to be an interesting couple of days. Look, we've got the game tomorrow. It's going to be an interesting game. I think Carrick is going to have to prove his worth tomorrow. And let's see, look, if Carrick wins tomorrow, it's going to be a massive tick. And look, the more Carrick wins these games, the more I'm going to get on board with it. But as of now, I still think that we need to take our time. Just for the last says, I hate the fact that they are paid obscene amounts of money and they still have clubs that are over a bench. And it is. I could not agree with you more. I think clubs need to get more balls. And that's where I'm at on it. So look, guys, I'm going to go. There won't be a show tonight. I don't do evening shows every single day. I normally do an evening show on a Tuesday and a Thursday, but because of the football this week, I did one yesterday. I'll do one tomorrow, and then I'll do one again on Friday. So look, guys, legends, look, thank you so much for being part of the chat. You guys, I can't thank you enough. I never get bored. Never get bored of thanking you guys, because it is the right thing to do. I never Bruno should be the face of, because he has shown us he's not just playing for the money. He loves the club. No, he's not. He's playing for the money. Abdullah, he's playing for the money. Don't ever be fooled. Bruno Fernandez doesn't play for this club out of the goodness of his heart. Bruno Fernandez plays for money. But look, I don't disagree with you. So look, guys, I'm going to go. JB and the first members have an amazing day. And big shout out to Sky as well. So look, I won't be back tonight. If anything does break, anything weird breaks, I will come back on. But look, if not, have a good rest of your day, morning, afternoon, even wherever you are in the world. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm JB. This is the United Devil channel. And I will see you very, very soon. Take care.